What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well, and yes, you read the title correctly. I have indeed sold and rebuilt my entire Sorare gallery. All 50 of my limited cards apart from 2 have been sold off. That means the likes of Wirtz, Kimmich, Bellingham, Muller and Vinicius Jr. are all gone, and I've had a total revamp and rethink of my strategy. As you can see in the top left hand corner, I've selected and added a handful of new limited cards, and for the first time I've picked up a playable contingent of a dozen rare cards. Our current gallery valuation is at 6.5 ETH, and I've added the 0.038 liquid ETH I'm still holding to the total in order to reflect the complete valuation of the club currently. So what's happened? 50 total cards have become 18. Why did I sell my entire collection and move towards rares? What happened to the strategy I outlined at the start of this series? And why have I decided to make this move now? Well, I'm going to try and explain my decision-making process as best as I can in this video, but I will state from the outset that without focusing on the limited cards that I did at the beginning of my journey, I would absolutely not have been able to pivot to a rare-heavy gallery only 2.5 months into my club's life cycle. In fact, I'm incredibly grateful that I chose to focus on limiteds to start off with in Sorare, because it allowed me to learn how SO5 works, how to win rewards, how to make mistakes without them being too costly, and how to make profit on certain cards. The fact I picked up so many in-demand, young, and informed players meant that I've more than doubled my ETH balance in a short space of time. If I'd simply focused on a rare collection from the beginning of the game, there is no way I would have been able to pick up the caliber of players I did, and I certainly wouldn't have generated as much profits as I have. So I'm absolutely not disillusioned with limited cards. This isn't me thinking less of them or not having any interest in them either. As I'll explain in a minute, I've still kept a significant interest in the scarcity. However, after assessing the total value of my gallery and looking at what I could potentially build in terms of a competitive rare setup, I decided to hit the proverbial button and listed my entire gallery for sale. And that is the key phrase here, competitive setup. If I'd run the numbers in my head and thought I wasn't going to be able to move up and field a competitive rare side in at least the All-Star division, I wouldn't have done it. As I explained in the first video of this series, I'm not really interested in simply grinding thresholds for ETH with an average side. Building competitive squads in the limited divisions with the same starting balance has yielded more return from both a rewards and a card value standpoint. So I'm not making the move for the simple sake of the scarcity. I made a calculated decision to focus my resources on and play for rewards in the higher division, whilst also still competing in All-Star Limited. So we're narrowing the focus from 3 competitive teams to 2. The irony is I've still been able to build 3 playable teams, which we'll look at in more detail shortly. But before we do, if any of you were wondering how hard it is to sell an entire Sorare gallery, and whether it matches up to the Sorare data valuation or not, I can tell you from my own experience now over the last few days that it hasn't been too difficult. If you're listing for reasonable prices, either lowest or close to lowest on market, and at a price you're happy with, you can get deals done. Now obviously it helped that I was selling limiteds, which are typically easier to shift than rares, but I can tell you that popular informed players on this game sell quickly. I would say it took about 2 to 3 days to sell almost all of the 48 cards, and in total I ended up raising around 6.5 ETH. Given that Sorare data had my gallery value around 6.8, and I listed a few cards slightly lower to make sure they sold, I would suggest that the valuation is pretty accurate, give or take a few $100s either side. I would also suggest if anyone offers to buy your gallery for a percentage of the value, unless yours is huge, I would list your cards individually if you have the time and the patience to do so. Anyway, that's what we ended up with, 6.5 ETH, about $17,000 to rebuild the gallery. So what have we bought? Why have we bought it? And what is the plan moving forwards? First and foremost, the whole reason behind making this transition in the first place was my realization that, hey, I can probably build a really solid all-star rare side with this kind of budget, and hence push for rewards in that division. Winning a rare card is obviously more valuable than most limited cards you can win under a tier 1, for example. So by hopefully competing for cards on a semi-regular basis in the rare division, we'll be looking at more upside in terms of our potential SO5 winnings. And although I don't just want to hit thresholds in this division, they are a nice insurance policy to have in those game weeks where perhaps the team underperforms or we hit an unexpected DNP. So at least we're getting some sort of return each week if we don't hit our targets. And to be clear, I don't expect to be hitting rewards all the time or straight away in All-Star Rare, but I have built this side with the intention of winning something occasionally. Now initially when I was planning the side, I got carried away and started to think about the 5 best scoring cards I could put together for my budget. While it was nice to think about, and I can't tell you how many different 5-man teams I had written down on my notes, I soon started to think a little more sensibly and coaxed myself into planning around 2 players in each position plus a goalkeeper, just so that when the inevitable injury or suspension happens, I'm not stuck with a player out and no one to come in as backup. So that is what I ended up doing. I've picked up 2 forwards, 2 midfielders, 2 defenders, and a goalkeeper that I think can form a decently competitive squad in the All-Star division over the next few months. So let's look at who I chose and why I picked them up. Starting with the goalkeeper, and this was a tough one, but I eventually settled on the Bosnian keeper Ibrahim Sijic for 0.81 ETH. He's ranked the 4th best keeper on the platform over the last 15 games with an average score of 60. He plays for Konyaspor, who currently sits 2nd in the Turkish Super League and have conceded the least goals of any team in the division. He also has 10 clean sheets from 22 games, which is incredible, so hopefully he can keep that up during the second half of the season, and if so, he's going to be a big help at the back. Alright, moving to the defense, and here I decided to bring in a player I've used previously, someone I enjoy watching, who's young with a lot of potential, Sven Botman. I picked him up on auction for 0.85, and he's one of a few players that are U23 eligible should I eventually want to or have the capability to branch out there. He's most likely going to move to a bigger club in the summer, so we'll keep an eye on that, but for the rest of this season I'm happy to have Botman in the side. The second defender I chose as a backup or rotation option was the Marseille defender Kaletakar for 0.25. Marseille have a great run of fixtures over the next month or so, and their defence has been fairly solid, so I'm glad his proposed move to West Ham fell through because I know he's a card who I can rely on to be consistent enough. Obviously, Saliba is the preferred option in that setup, but for 5 times the price, he wasn't a realistic option. He is, however, one of the 2 limited cards who survived the club rebuild, and we'll look into that a little later when we discuss the limited team I've put together. So those are my 2 defenders, both playing in Ligue 1. Botman and Kaletakar are 2 relatively solid options who both have L15s in the 60s and can potentially bring home some nice points. Moving into the midfield, and this was tough because I set out with one clear target in mind, and that was Dimitri Payet. As I mentioned, Marseille have a great run of fixtures, and Payet has been one of the most creative midfielders in the whole of Europe this season, with more shot creating actions than any other player and 17 goal contributions in 18 starts. Obviously those numbers are reflected in his bonkers SO5 scores over the last 15 games, and I had no doubts he'd have the midfield position locked down. Unfortunately I couldn't get a deal done at a price I was comfortable with, so I had to look at alternative options. Payet was my first choice, but sometimes you have to reassess and look further down your list of potential targets. So one of the players I went for is similar to Payet in profile, capable of decisives, on set pieces, a creative outlet in his side, just a little less consistent in terms of SO5 score, and that's Jonas Hoffman from Gladbach for 0.395 ETH. Recently back from knee surgery, Hoffman is a midfielder capable of putting up scores in the 80s and 90s on a good day, and there's plenty of reasons for that. If we rank the expected goals plus assists per 90 of the players in Europe's top 5 leagues, naturally the list is dominated by forwards, but if we look for midfielders, Payet ranks 31st with 0.73 expected decisives per 90, and Jonas Hoffman actually sits in 50th place with 0.67. That's ahead of top performers like Florian Wirtz, Hakan Çalhanoğlu, and Kevin De Bruyne. Checking out his scouting report, we can see he's overperforming his expected goals with 7 in 15 games, and underperforming his expected 3.8 assists, having only registered 1 so far. Gladbach have had a string of bad results this season, but they have some decent looking fixtures ahead, and if they do manage to turn it around in the second half of the year, Hoffman could be a big part of that. Nevertheless, I'm happy with the pickup. He's a great potentially high scoring midfielder for my team. The second midfielder I bought was actually the most expensive card of the entire rebuild, and that's Vinicius Souza, on auction for 0.93. A young midfielder with big scoring potential and a huge AA game in the middle of the field. He's less decisive capable than Hoffman, but one of the best midfielders on the platform over the last few months. He'll no doubt move to a different club in the summer, which could affect his SO5 output, and perhaps he's a risk, but I'm excited to have another top midfield card to play for the next little while. Hoffman and Souza are 2 midfielders I feel I can trust to produce some good scores for the rest of the European season, and hopefully place us high in the All-Star division. The forward position was a position I ummed and ahed over. I had about an ETH to spend, and believe it or not, but for rare forwards there isn't really one standout option for that budget. I consider the likes of Moussa Diaby, Ciro Immobile, Junya Ito, and even Yunus Akgün, who had won as my tier 1 limited reward last time around. After a few days of back and forth, I decided to settle for 2 pickups, one consistent performer and a speculative backup. Muniain is a card I've owned and sold in the limited division, and while he'd been solid, he wasn't going to compete for starting places with Thomas Muller and Karim Benzema. But in a rare squad, Muniain fits the exact profile of player I'm looking for. Someone with high AA scores who can put up solid 50s and 60s on a bad week. His average all-around score over the last 15 games actually places him second on the platform for a forward with 20.1. Only Cecina ranks higher in that statistic, and if we widen the sample size to the last 40 games, he still ranks 7th for AA score, so he's a really solid creative forward who can fill in that position most weeks reliably. comfortably. The second forward I picked up was Matthias Kunya. I actually managed to get his jersey number mint to 19 of 100, which was nice. He's yet to nail down solid minutes for Atletico this season, but he's a player with massive potential upside if and when he gets a solid run of games. He almost always comes off the bench if he doesn't start, and has been starting for Brazil in the recent World Cup qualifiers. If we look at his scouting report, we'll see why perhaps he's had such strong links with a move to Liverpool recently. In terms of forwards, he's a technically gifted player who likes to drop deep and receive the ball, similar to Bobby Firmino. He has 0.26 assists per 90, 0.33 goals per 90, and if we scroll down further, we'll see his creativity and directness reflected in the goal and shot creation stats, particularly the defensive stats where he ranks in the 99th percentiles against other forwards in Europe. His tackles, interceptions and pressures per 90 are some of the best, and at 22 it would make sense for him to be the perfect replacement for Firmino in Klopp's system. He would slot straight into that aggressive false 9 role, breaking up the play, creating spaces for the attacking wingers, and drawing fouls from the opposition. For 0.375 ETH, he's a risk with rotation and inconsistent minutes, but if he can become a consistent presence in Simeone's side, I can only see him rising in value given he's U23 eligible and heading toward the World Cup. So there we have it, 7 cards bought for a combined 4.27 ETH. What do you think of the team? Do you think it's strong enough to win the odd reward in the All-Star Rare division? Let me know in the comments below. You're probably thinking, hang on, there's 12 rare cards in your club and you said you had 6.5 ETH to spend. What happened to the rest? Well, what I went and did was a little future planning, picking up a full Sapporo stack for the start of the new J-League season for a combined 0.9 ETH. First of all, these cards will serve as backups in the worst case scenario when and if I'm missing players in my All-Star team. And secondly, I wanted to have a side that I could chuck into the Asian division when it starts up again in a few weeks' time. Having this side means I'll also have a playable base of cards from which to build from and into during the European off-season, which I personally think is a great move to have in mind. I don't think there's a great rush to go out and pick up Asian and MLS cards now, but it's something I want to try and build up over the next few months, so that I'm more than ready when the time comes and when my main squad no longer has games. That still leaves me to discuss the final piece of the rebuild, and that's the limited side I've put together to compete in the All-Star division there. As I mentioned before, I haven't left the limited scarcity behind at all. In fact, I'm planning to use this side as perhaps an extra source of yield to feed into the rest of the club and build it back out. My 6 limited cards have a combined value of just under 1.5 ETH, and they form a potential SO5 dream team. William Saliba and Jonas Hoffman are the 2 sole survivors of this entire rebuild. The Marseille fixture favourability and Saliba's big AA game played a big part in him sticking around, and Akgun, as my first ever tier 1 reward, represents the culmination of the opening chapter of my SO5 journey, and had to stay for both the sentimentality and the utility he'll add. So with the Marseille fixtures in mind, I've paired Saliba up with Pau Lopez in goal. He has some great average scores and actually ranks joint top in Europe's top 5 leagues for clean sheet percentage and 5th for goals against per 90. The final 3 players I brought in are SO5 beasts who can hopefully win us consistent rewards, so we can build back our collection and yield more value in terms of ETH. And they are Nicolas Otamendi, Ryota Morioka, and Dusan Tadic. For those of you with even a little experience playing SO5, you'll know that these players are some of the most consistent in terms of score on the entire platform. Tadic is the second best forward on the game with an L15 of 73.5. Morioka has had a slight dip in form recently, but he still puts up an average 68.3. And Otamendi is a card I have in the common division who always performs well, and therefore I trust to put up regular high scores. His L15 is 64.7. So this limited side of Lopez, Saliba, Otamendi, Morioka and Tadic is the best team I could think of with the remaining ETH balance I had. Let's hope they pump out big scores in the weeks ahead. I'm hoping that the rewards won there can supplement the club and perhaps feed into the efforts of the rare division, or continue to add value to the limited side. I guess we'll find out how it all pans out in the weeks to come, but that is where I'm at on Sorare. As it stands, the gallery is worth 6.5 ETH, plus the 0.038 in the bank, which equals approximately $17,059 at the time of recording. I'm up almost $1,200 since the last episode. With this reset, I've laid down some small but strong foundations to build from. If you're excited to see how this all goes, like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter where I'll be posting out some of my successes and failures over the coming weeks. Who knows what happens, this may ultimately backfire and blow up in my face, but I'll be here to document it either way. I hope your galleries are all looking in good shape, and as I said in the last video, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask them below. I'll certainly respond. Or you can reach out on Twitter, as I'm always happy to chat about all things Sorare. But that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Best of luck, and I'll catch you next time.